Hey, what's going on there, college football fans? We're here for another week of the Swampy Coliseum Podcast. Nathaniel Gilmore here is with me. What's going on, Nathaniel?
What's up? What's up? Another great week of college football to look forward to, huh?
Another great week. Again, I'm Andrew Hudson. And before we go any farther, let's just take a moment to say congratulations to Nathaniel's Los Angeles Dodgers. We're recording this on Thursday. They just took home the World
Oh
Series
man.
last night. You got any words, Nathaniel?
It's the failure of the USC season has really been muted by this champion. I think maybe there was a sacrifice like, all right, USC, you're gonna have a really rough season, but you get the Dodgers winning the World Series. I mean, it was a 2020, like it was a championship, but didn't feel 100% authentic. This one, man, I was up all night. I could not go to sleep. It was a great feeling. I hope that the Jaguars, maybe the Gators
Oof.
win soon, just so we can share in this happiness.
Yeah, we'll see. That sure would be nice. I know some people throw around the joking thought of the sports gods, they
Yeah,
give and they take away. We don't believe in those things. We believe there's one true God and we follow
yes,
Jesus
sir.
Christ. But man, it's so nice to see you get a championship. And yeah, hopefully
Appreciate it.
our other teams can have a little more success in the near future. But with that, we've got some games to review from last week to preview, and why don't you start us off with the Trojans?
Yeah, so this was USC beat Rutgers 42-20. It was a funny one just because I was driving. I was watching the Dodgers game one, Freddie Freeman with the grand slam. And
Hmm.
then I was kind of like, keeping check on USC because they were on Fox Sports 1 or something. They were kicked off Fox because of the World Series. And so I was just kind of following along, and they looked good. I mean, we had a lot of depth issues on defense, just a lot of injuries. We didn't have our entire secondary pretty much, and we had a lot of a couple injuries on the defensive line and on the linebacking core. So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, realistically, we should beat Rutgers. But then there's the creeping thought, okay, we've been struggling to put away bad teams. We just lost to Maryland, who is not much better than Rutgers, and we now have no defense. So it was kind of like, oh, what's going to happen? And then we just out the gates. I think we had 4 drives in the first half, and we scored 4 touchdowns. And it was just efficiency. Um, we ran the ball a lot more. Woody Marks had, I think, 3 touchdowns. Just a great game from him. 90 something yards. Miller Moss was just on time. I think he had his only incompletion for the first half of the game or something like that was it was a pass to Zach Branch in the end zone. He caught it, landed, and they called it complete for a touchdown. And then they overturned it afterwards. Like watching the replay, you can't even see the ball move. You can't see anything really. So again, Big Ten refs, whatever. I'm kind of getting tired of it, but it is what it
I've heard
is.
that before from you.
So it just irks me so much. Like the Minnesota thing, them blatantly straight up saying they made the wrong call after the game, which
Hmm.
led to a loss. That's tough. Like at most that would have been an overtime game if we didn't go down and score. And there's pictures, they're like pictures from like a different view of that play. And the dude fumbled it like
Mm.
before even getting close to the end zone. The ball was in the air. I don't know. That was frustrating. And then this game, just Zach Branch just needing a breakout. I think that would have been his first touchdown all year long. And they call it back. It was a great catch. And there was not even evidence to even question it. It was weird. I rewatching that play like 30 times. I was like, what do you even see there? But yeah,
Yeah.
second half kind of got dicey. They're just scoring a lot. I think they got it 28-20. Once it was 28-20, I looked at my brother. I was like, we're gonna blow this, huh? But I mean, they did what they needed to do all year, and that was put their foot on the neck of the opponent, create separation. In a couple drives, it was 42-20. The defense was out there for a while, but yeah, defense played well. Manungai, their running back, was the only real issue we had, and it was just tackling him. We did a good job. Kaliak Manis, their quarterback, not a good quarterback, and I mean, we definitely we were blessed with a lot of missed passes, but now we're just looking on to Washington. I mean, it's a Jed Fish team. You can expect a lot of what, Arizona did last year. And of course, we played Arizona last year, triple overtime with Caleb Williams and really stressful game. Hopefully, it's not like that. We're going to Washington, which is a very hectic environment. But I mean, this is a Washington team that's been run on half the season. I mean, I will abuse them with the run. They just get ran on consistently. So that's what we need to do. We need to run on them. Indiana showed the game plan, just run the ball, and then Miller Moss, pick them apart with RPOs and deep bombs, and we'll see what happens. Defensively, we just kind of have to limit the big plays. They have a decent running game that complements a good passing game and Will Rogers, and just make Will Rogers have to make tough throws. That's all we can do, and hopefully our offense pulls away with it.
Right. Yeah, last week, Washington went up against undefeated Indiana team with their backup quarterback, and he's been playing great, but took that loss, and so USC is hoping to take some momentum in with them after beating Rutgers, and that's what they're needing. Momentum just going in the right direction
Yeah,
and
yeah.
winning this next game, uh, even though Washington obviously isn't what it has been. This is still a playoff team from last year that has some moxie with them, even
hmm
even with the new coach, with the new quarterback. But just another win is what you're looking for just to move forward. But Florida's coming off of another bye week this week, our annual bye week before the Florida Georgia game, and there's some debate there too. We call it the Florida Georgia game, not Georgia Florida, and simply because it's alphabetical order. Okay, like I'm just being smart here. Florida, Georgia, one of the biggest rivalries in college football, and there are a lot of interesting things coming into the game. One, you got Trevor Etienne, who's played the last 2 years at Florida, but transferred to Georgia. Is potentially, I would say, probably the best running back in the SEC, even with some other guys maybe playing better. He's very skilled. With that, we obviously have Graham Mertz out for the season, so DJ Lagway is in his place. You have Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback, coming back home, a Jacksonville native, playing back in Jacksonville for the second time. And so many interesting storylines, and obviously Georgia being the number 2 team in the country, coming off of a couple weeks ago, them beating Texas in Austin. So, huge matchup here. It's the biggest game you circle on the calendar every year. Just looking forward to the Florida Georgia matchup. And Georgia's a huge favorite, about 16 and a half points. They're ranked, Florida being unranked. So there are going to have to be some really key things happen. Some key things have to happen for Florida to be able to have a chance. And I'll say that we mentioned this last week, but the Florida defense is going to have to stand up and make plays. Georgia, to this point in the season, has shown a tendency to be mistake prone. And Carson Beck has 8 interceptions on the season, including 3 last week, even in the win against Texas. But ever since the UCF game, we held UCF to 13 points, and then the high-flying Tennessee offense to 23, including overtime. So really 17 points in regulation. And then we blew out Kentucky 48-20 in our last game, getting interceptions, Cormani McClain playing really well, and just making plays. So that has to happen in order to have a chance to win. And not only making the big plays, but then doing something off of it. Get an interception and score a touchdown that drive. Stop them on 4th down and drive down and get a field goal. empty possessions are going to kill us in this game. And in order to have any chance, we have to make the most of every opportunity. So those are going to be the biggest things. I I'm watching the game just to have a good time. I'm not necessarily expecting a win, but I wouldn't say that it's impossible for the Gators to win this game. They have to have some key huge plays on offense. They've got to be playmakers on defense. And yeah, it should be enjoyable. But next week, we're at Texas. Then after that, we're home against LSU and Ole Miss before ending the season at FSU. So four straight ranked opponents in the SEC, starting with the biggest one this week. But I think with it being a huge rivalry, that means Georgia isn't going to be sleepwalking their way into the game, and
Yeah.
neither is Florida. So it's going to be a tough one for the Gators.
Yeah, what are your thoughts with the so the game's always in Jacksonville, but the stadium's
Right.
getting renovated, so they're moving it. I forgot where they're moving, but it's another off-campus site. What's your thoughts on just this game being like an off-campus game?
Yeah, this game has to stay in Jacksonville. I mean, it's been there for in the last 100 years, they've played there 90 times. And
Jeez.
there have only been a few times of it being because of stadium renovations or whatnot. So it's just perfect. And being from Jacksonville myself, I loved growing up and going to those games. But the party that happens the whole week leading up, there's tailgating going on. The RV park is full of of people just eating and hanging out, drinking, doing everything there before the game. I heard, I'm pretty sure that the first matchup in 2026 will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in
Yeah,
Atlanta,
yeah,
and then the next year will be at Raymond James in Tampa. So flip-flopping between going in Florida, no, in Georgia and then Florida. But
yeah,
with that being said, it would just do a lot to hurt the rivalry, I fear, if it turned into a home and home
really.
situation. Like there's only a few huge games like this that are rivalries that happen at neutral sites every year. You think of Texas, Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
Army, Navy does
Yeah,
that. There are others as well. Texas A&M, Arkansas, as funny as that is, is
really
yeah, that's at Jerry World every year. So
makes sense.
there's a few that have this, and it's just so special, and it's been going on for so long. So yeah, and also, how could they not have it at the new Jacksonville Stadium? Like, it's gonna be amazing. So I'm excited for when those end up happening, which that, as an aside, is a huge thing for the Jaguars. People talk about fear that the Jaguars are gonna move at some point away from Jacksonville, but this new stadium deal with a 30-year deal in place guarantees that they're gonna stay in Jacksonville, which is really encouraging too. It's good stuff. Hopefully we don't lose them like the Rams, like the St. Louis fans and Oakland fans in the past.
You guys should be fine.
Yeah, should be good for now. We'll see
Florida's a
about
big
30 years
enough
from now.
market.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we're looked down upon in many ways, but glad to have the Jaguars for sure. Well, let's talk about this week. We've covered our teams a little bit. How about this past week in games that happened? And we were highlighting especially some SEC games that were going on, and probably the biggest game of the week was that Texas A&M LSU matchup, which ended up being a blowout win for Texas A&M, 38 to 23. Man, what'd you take away from this one?
I mean, just with USC being LSU, that was kind of a team you're like, oh, I just want to see LSU win out. And they looked good in the first half. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier was making good throws, NFL level throws, and they're up 17-7 going into halftime. And,
Wow.
they're driving a bit, and Texas A&M offense looked dead. Connor Weigman was not looking good whatsoever. And then, there's just a big spark where, I mean, there's a big, I think Weigman got sacked, stalled the drive, and then turn around Garrett Nussmeier. All you have to do, take care of the ball, keep moving the ball downfield. And on third down, I believe it was a short play. A short down, throws a bad interception. And immediately They put in Marcel Reed, which we've been talking about a little bit of
Yeah.
which way should you go? Weigman had realistically one good game against Missouri, and Marcel Reed looked like he could run this offense a little better just with his running ability, and that's what happened. I mean, they go down, they score. LSU had three straight drives with three straight turnovers, and Texas A&M answered with a touchdown each drive, and that went from a 17-7 to a 28-7 Texas A&M just complete swing. And once that happened, I mean, LSU scored, but it was kind of over from there. Just Texas A&M had all the momentum. Marcel Reed went 2 for 2 for like 70 yards because he had a big 50-yarder and then a nice 16-yarder for a touch, not a touchdown, but to get him within range. And I mean, Marcel Reed is, I think you have to keep him throughout the rest of the season at this point.
Yeah, I would say so. The offense just looked completely different when he was in the game. And he came in at that, 8-minute mark or so in the third quarter, and they never looked back. And we were saying this even since the Florida game, right? We were hoping Florida would have a chance to win that game, and he just ran all over us and destroyed us. And I was surprised that they immediately went back to Connor Wagman when he got healthy again, but then he played well and they were able to
Yeah.
win some games. But this might have been the final straw for
Yeah.
them. And it's so funny looking at the stat line. Marcel Reed was only 2 for 2 for 70 yards, having a DJ Lagway type stat line there. But three rushing touchdowns. The LSU was just completely shut down. And we've talked about Nussmeier. It's just the decision making. He 50% completion percentage. He's going to throw for yards, because they throw it down the field. So 400 passing yards, but the three interceptions is just it's just too much. So
Yeah.
that LSU offense can't keep things going when mistakes are happening like that. So huge win for Texas A&M, and we're going to be talking about kind of what this means and the what those on the outside looking in for the playoff will look like in a little bit. But let's move on to another SEC game, one that we were surprised about to be so keyed in on at this point in the year. But Texas at Vandy, and man, Vandy is just they're good, man.
They're a
They're a
good team.
good team. Ended up losing, just barely 27-24 to Texas. And man, I was watching this game. I'm glued to the TV to watch Diego Pavia play and just to see if Vandy can actually have a chance to win these games. And they played pretty well. It was just some mistakes that happened that took away their chance to actually win the game. Texas started off hot and they came out and scored a couple times, and Vandy was crawling their way back to that point. But from there, they held them in the last three quarters to 7-3 and 3 points apiece. So this Vandy defense is all that, and their offense finally got themselves going, but it just wasn't enough in the end. But it was a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I mean, Diego Pavia just I mean, obviously we're not putting up Heisman numbers, but this is one of those just season impact player. And
Yeah,
I mean, all year long, especially in that Alabama game and in this game, he's just, he's not putting up, all the stats, but he makes plays when it matters. Then you look on the other side, Quinn Ewers. It just seems like once the game kind of started, getting closer and closer, he just wasn't as efficient. He wasn't making
right.
the plays he needed to make. Their run game wasn't, doing anything crazy to where you can just lean on the run game. So it was like, all right, Quinn, make plays. And I mean, drove drove them down the field when they needed to at the end a couple of times, get those two field goals to kind of, take the lead and put it a little out of reach. But man, do you like to be him? Like you got to think those Archie Manning calls, like that's got to be creeping up. And I mean, Sark
Yeah,
already pulled him once, and
yeah, it's happened already.
as they're trying to make a playoff push, especially with the one loss already. A decent, they don't have that rough of a schedule. They just have one more ranked team on the way. They have to go through Florida, so we'll see. But I mean, you got to think this bye week they have to figure some things out. Quinn Ewers, his stats this year. I mean, it doesn't help that he's been hurt for most of it,
Right.
but it's not looking great. So, I mean, does he return for another year? But then he has to go against Archie Manning? Does he transfer out? I think, yeah, he has to get it back on track the last 4 games if, they want a shot at this championship.
Yeah, and I'm not confident in it. I'll say when I turned on the game, I had it on from the beginning, and Vandy started off with a quick interception and then touchdown. Pavia dove to the pylon with the ball and scored, and I was like, "Oh, baby, this is on!"
This-
Like, here we go, Vandy, let's go. And they couldn't get too much going after that, but oh, I was really hoping for another Vandy win and just to see what would happen as a result. But yeah, like you're saying, both teams kind of down the stretch were ending with turnovers on downs. Texas
yeah.
had an interception late. They both ended with scores on their last drives of field goal by Texas and a touchdown by Vandy, and then they weren't able to get the onside kick at the end of the game. But definitely good. Texas is still in there. They're
Yeah.
number 5 in the country. They have a 7-1 record. They certainly have a chance for the playoff. But as you were saying, they're not going to win the championship if Quinn Ewers continues to play this way. But that brings us to some other interesting games. There weren't a huge going on this week, but I want to have a chance to talk about some of these teams on the outside looking in. So even those 10 teams from 13th in the country to 22nd, which of those have the best chance of making it into the playoff? And next week, we're going to have our first official CFP rankings to see how they're actually grading out the teams. But from this week, Boise State, number 17, had a close win against UNLV. They were able to pull it out on Friday night. Along with that, you had um, you had Navy right there at 12, or sorry, Notre Dame at 12, able to pull out that win against Navy. Indiana, number 13 in the country, was able to beat Washington with that backup quarterback who's been playing so well. Alabama won. Kansas State barely beat Kansas. Ole Miss and SMU snuck out with victories. So, looking at these 13 through 22 in the rankings, I'll read them out and then I want to hear your thoughts, Nathaniel. So, we've got starting at 13, Indiana, Alabama, Boise State, LSU, Kansas State, Pitt, Ole Miss, SMU, Army, Washington State. Washington State is sneaking up there over the past couple weeks.
Yeah.
They're representing the Pac-12. But what do you think of these teams here? Who's got the best chance to make it to the playoff? Who are the contenders, the pretenders? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. Out of that group, ironically, I think the 13, 14, 15 have the best shot. I mean,
Mm.
obviously, Boise State, you just have to win out. They have one loss, but it was to Oregon. And you do get, that group of five bid to get in. I mean, Ashton Genty has looked great. He had his first off game against UNLV, and he still put up over 100 yards. And honestly, watching that game, UNLV just stacked the box the entire time and just made their quarterback Maddox Madsen make
Hmm.
plays. And it was close. UNLV is a great team, but I mean, the rest of the schedule doesn't look too daunting. They play our Aztecs next, I think on Friday again. And
Mm.
then they have Nevada, San Jose, Wyoming, and Oregon State. So not a daunting schedule. They win those and the Mountain West Championship. I mean, they're in there. That's all they have to do. And same with Indiana and Alabama. Indiana, they have Michigan, which doesn't look too tough now. They have Ohio State, which is going to be their biggest test, and then Purdue. Um, Again, they went out, or if they lose to Ohio State, but it's a close game, there's still ways, positions where they can kind of make a run, a bid at that Big Ten championship, but also like a low end 12, 11 seed type play. And Alabama, they've been disappointing, but look where they at in the AP. I mean, obviously we have to kind of see where the college football playoff voters will put them, but at 14 with 2 losses, I mean, they have LSU. And after seeing, that's going to be a good game, but if they make it past LSU, it's easy pickings the rest of the way. And they're not going to need, they're probably not going to make the SEC championship, but they're one of those teams where you have to give them respect. And, once, even if they don't make it, they'll probably be a third SEC team in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the rest of that Alabama schedule, they've got Mercer, Oklahoma, and Auburn to finish the year. So you think they would have a clean sweep there. So a lot's going to come down to that Alabama LSU game. The winner of that has a huge chance of making it into the playoff. So we'll see what ends up happening. But from here, what we're looking at is probably these ACC teams are going to eat each other at some
Yeah.
point. You've got
Yeah.
Miami and Clemson who are up there, and I would pick them to win the ACC over anyone else. And I don't know that any of these other teams are going to make it into the playoff if they lose a game. I mean, Pitt is 7-0 this year, and they're only number 18 in the country. So
Yeah.
you can tell the respect that they have, the lack of respect, really, that the voters
Yeah.
have for them. Same thing with the Big 12. We've got Kansas State up there, and they, after winning a game close against Kansas, drop a spot in the rankings. So again, with the lack of respect, a lot of it is going to come down to Boise State or Army, really,
Yeah.
when we look at it, because Navy just took that tough loss against Notre Dame. Army is obviously going to play Navy later in the year, but that's going to be after the conference championship game. So their last big test is going to be Notre Dame. They also
Yeah.
play them in a few weeks, and that'll be a huge matchup. If they're able to beat Notre Dame, then they will go into the conference championship undefeated. They'll most likely play Navy, where if they win that game, then they've it's so tough. What are the voters
Yeah.
going to choose
Yeah,
between
exactly.
Army and Boise State? If both teams win out, you've got an undefeated Army team with a win over Notre Dame, and then you have Boise State with their quality games as well. Like it's going to have to be one of those two, and I just don't know that I see them taking both.
Yeah,
So,
there's no way. No
what are
way.
your thoughts? If both teams win out, who do you think they take?
I mean, I think you have to take Army. If they beat Notre Dame, that's a top 10 win at that point, assuming Notre Dame kind of wins the next few games. Um, and you have to take Army because if you look at them side by side, you have an undefeated team and a one-loss team. Boise State obviously lost to what is now the number one team in the country, but it was a very close game. And you can't really knock them for it. But if you're side by side comparing, I mean, Boise State, do they have a ranked win? I don't know if they do,
No,
and it'll just be
no.
1-0, one ranked win against nothing. And if you really, count strength of schedule, they're pretty similar. I mean, the American and the Mountain West, I don't think are too different in quality of teams.
No.
Um, so I mean, even though Boise State is 6 spots up, once we see that win, if they win against Notre Dame, that's going to, I think, vault them ahead of Boise State. And I think, yeah, that's what the college football playoff committee is going to have to choose.
I agree. Looking at the rest of Boise State's schedule, San Diego State this weekend, then Nevada, San Jose State, Wyoming, Oregon State. It is should be easy pickings, you would think, for them with how they've been playing. But I would agree with you, and I would love to see Army in the playoff. Are you kidding
I
me?
would love it too.
Oh, that'd
Seeing
be
like
fantastic.
Georgia go up against the wishbone offense triple. And I've been watching those Army games. There, it's not just that same old wishbone. They have a lot of pistol, they have some shotgun, they throw it a little bit, but they're doing the same concepts, but from a lot more different like formations. And
Yeah.
their quarterback Daly, he is making great decisions, and he's a dog. So I think that Notre Dame game, I think that's going to be a lot closer than that Navy game, because I just think Army's a little more well-rounded offensively
Yeah.
and defensively, and I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, and really, I'll mention it for a second. Man, it was so frustrating while I was watching that Navy Notre Dame game because I picked Navy to win,
Yeah,
and at the beginning of the game, it was just dumb mistakes.
yeah,
Not they were unforced errors. It
yeah,
was going for a handoff and fumbling it in the mesh, or a pitch that was then just dropped by the running back. They had three turnovers that were just unforced that and they were best in the country in turnovers before that game and then just lost it, and at that point the wheels fell off. Notre Dame took the
yeah,
lead and there was really no coming back from that because these teams in the wishbone aren't built to come back
yeah,
from large deficits. So it was tough to watch, but I agree. Army's looking so good. Bryson Daly, last I saw, was leading the nation in rushing touchdowns with 19.
hmm,
Don't know if that's changed, but he has been playing so well, and yeah, we would love to see it. But it would be tough for those voters to leave out Ashton Genty from the playoff.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know they want to have eyes on those games. I mean, I was tuning in to turn on a Friday night Boise State game last
yeah,
week just to see
exactly.
him play. I was listening to some sports radio saying the guy on the radio show and his son were turning on the game to watch it, and they live in Florida, like just to see Ashton Genty play. So they would love to have those eyes on the college football playoff, but we'll have to see if both teams end up winning out. If one team loses, obviously that'll play into things, but it should be fun to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah. Would you rather two of these group of five teams get in or two Big 12 teams get in?
Oh, that
Because
brings up
it'd
another
have to be
question.
between the two, I think, because Iowa State undefeated, BYU still I honestly don't know how, but BYU still undefeated. And I mean, those two teams, if they keep up, and I mean, I don't think they play each other the rest of the year, so it'd be in the conference championship. And if one of them has a loss, like, do you hop like a Boise State, like let's just say Boise State one loss, BYU one loss, like you'd have to, and if there's one open spot because an SEC team loses or a Big Ten team kind of loses, like, who do you put in?
Yeah, that's such a tough question. I mean, looking at both of them, the rest of the way out, BYU has Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, and Houston to finish off the year. So definitely not a murderer's row by any stretch of the imagination. And then Iowa State has Texas Tech, Kansas, Cincinnati, Utah, and the big game will be against Kansas State at the
Yeah,
beginning of the year. We'll have Iowa State, Kansas State. One of those, if both go undefeated for the rest of the season, they're going to have to, one will take out the other,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
it'll come down to that conference championship game. So I would say, well, definitely a Big 12 team can only have one loss to make it in. But if they have one loss and that loss is in this conference championship, then I think they would make it in. But a two-loss Big 12 team would
yeah,
be tough to put them in.
definitely. Yeah.
So,
And you also got to think there might be an extra spot just because if in that scenario, Notre Dame loses again. And I think if Notre Dame has two losses on their record, they don't make it either.
yeah, and I don't think they should. That would be too much for them to overcome, I'd say. So,
Yeah.
good stuff. Well, man, this stuff is shaking out. Like we said, next week we'll see our first official college football playoff rankings. So that'll be interesting. We'll cover that on next week's episode. But now we're moving on to a trivia question. Nathaniel's got that ready for me. Um, and we'll see what we've got. Obviously, you can listen to the question, pause it. If you want to play along, you can come up with your answers. But what do we have this week, Nathaniel?
All right. So this week, kind of want to get back to the roots. You saw, oh, we've been seeing, Florida quarterbacks doing well in college, making to the NFL. Um, there's a lot of them, especially since 2000. So I
Right.
was about to give one away, but your question is, can you name me every quarterback? There's 10 of them. Every quarterback from the University of Florida since 2000. So 1999 doesn't count. Danny Warfel doesn't count. But can you name me every quarterback from Florida since 2000 to make an NFL start? There's 10 of them. And I
Mm.
will warn you, there's two, I think two of them that are kind of like, they're kind of nasty work, but they fall within the rules.
Okay. So to make an NFL start.
Make an NFL start. So if they
Okay.
played in a game, but they did not start, that does not count.
Okay. We're gonna start them off with Jeff Driscoll.
Yep. Jeff
Let's start
Driscoll
off.
played from 2011 to 2014.
Yeah, start off with these ones. We got Jacoby Brissett.
There we go. Okay.
Hmm. We have okay. Let's go Rex Grossman
Yep.
with the Bears. Obviously, we'll go Tebow.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Trask has not started a game to this point in his career.
There you go.
Um, we have. Let me see. I've got to think through. Hmm. I don't think Jesse Palmer started a game in his career. Did Jesse Palmer? Did he
Yes,
start in the
sir.
NFL? Did he really?
Yes, he did. I think he had
Wow.
like 4 or 5 starts.
Mm. Okay, so we got five.
Yep. 5 out of 10.
And I don't think Chris Leak did either. We've
Nope.
got Chris Leak, yeah, the national champion, didn't he had a little run in the Canadian Football League, I'm pretty sure. But okay, let me see. We've got I've got to think through those 2000s and uh, in the 2010s, there's just been a mishmash of all the like Skylar Morningweg has played for us, and we've had some, you know, Austin Appleby come through there for a little bit. Felipe Franks. I mean, it's just not been the great run of quarterbacks in that era. Um, and so you're saying starting a game in the 2000s in the NFL.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
In the NFL, start a game. I'll give you a little hint. Doesn't have to be at quarterback.
Wow. But does Jordan Reed count for that?
No, no.
Okay, I was gonna say because he played a little quarterback for us. Okay, obviously Cam Newton. Obviously Cam Newton's there.
Oh, there we go. I was
Um,
waiting. I was
yeah,
thinking like, oh, well, I have to give a hint for this one.
I know. Yeah, I was blanking on him. I was thinking of, of more of the far stretch guys. Um, okay, that's six.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, man, I've got to think through these guys. So we had Chris Leak led to Tebow, and Cam was there, and then we had John Brantley. He didn't play in the NFL. After him, oh, like Malik Zaire didn't ever start in the NFL. I'm trying to think of other guys in that kind of realm. Is there someone before Leak?
There is one person before Leak. This one's a tough one. Um, I will give you a hint. He, in that 2000 year, you guys started 3 quarterbacks. Palmer,
Yeah.
Grossman, and then this third one.
Oh gosh.
He transferred out, by the way, after 2 years.
And then he went on and started a game in the NFL.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that is tough. And so we've got him and then three more that are after more in the 2010s kind of era.
Yeah. So we have all, okay, 2 of them are in the 2010s, one's in the 2020s.
Hmm.
But the two And I will
Oh
say
yeah,
both.
yeah. Okay, I've got Will Greer started a game.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Will Greer. Uh, yeah, the West Virginia product. Um, and shoot, yeah, I'm trying to think of other. I think okay, so we've got, and he's a 2020 guy.
He's a 2020 guy. He has been starting for like 2 years in the NFL off and on.
Huh.
Injuries had to
Uh,
do with that.
oh,
Fatigue had to do with that.
I'm so dumb. Anthony Richardson, yes.
There
Um,
we go.
yeah, I think over the past week I've been trying to remove him from my mind because he's such an embarrassment. Uh, yeah, that's been disappointing to see him. If you got, I mean, you guys have had to have heard this, but he took himself out for a third down and goal play because he was tired
He was
for
tired.
the Colts, and they have subsequently gone with Flacco now. They're sending Anthony Richardson to the bench, so oh my goodness, that's yeah. I've been trying to forget about him. So we have two more.
Two more.
Okay, so we got a 2010s guy
Yeah.
here.
So 2010s. You have, it's like late 2010s. You've named him. He's transferred.
Hmm.
This is the guy that doesn't play quarterback, but he plays another position in the
Oh,
NFL. And then the 2000 one I was talking about earlier.
I've mentioned him.
You have mentioned him.
Whoa. And he started at a different position.
Yes.
Uh,
He's a tight end right now, if that helps.
yeah. Now you got me thinking of Trey Burton after saying that. Um, who?
He
I mean, now I'm
actually
just thinking
started
of,
one game with Atlanta in 2022 as a quarterback.
did Felipe?
2020, yep.
Man, I knew that. That's crazy. For now at this point, I'm putting Felipe Franks and Desmond Ritter as the same guy in my mind.
Right?
Atlanta, they went there, they were like played a little bit and then were just cast aside. He started at tight end for anyone?
He has not, but he
Okay.
has gotten some play with the Panthers this year at tight end.
Oh
I
yeah.
think he has like
That's
one
crazy.
target or something like that.
Oh my
And that
goodness.
2022 year with Atlanta, I think he started dabbling with the tight end position. So I'm not 100% sure if that start was a quarterback or
Sure.
tight end.
Well, yeah, that was my quarterback during my time in college. Him and Emory Jones mainly
Oh
were
gosh.
that was a rough time. Also a little Malik Zaire there at the beginning, but yikes. Okay, now give me a little clue about that early guy.
All right, Brock. Okay, this quarterback, you might know the first half of his first name.
Uh-huh.
He quarterback. I mean, yeah, quarterback from 2000 to 2001 at Florida, and then he transferred to Miami.
Hmm.
He got a little play there, and then what you call it? He got drafted. Where did he get drafted to? I'm not sure if he got drafted, but he ended up on the St. Louis Rams, and he wasn't drafted because he was on the Rams
Sure.
in 2007 for 2 years, played in two games and started one of them.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so this one was probably the nastiest out of all of them. I was looking through, and I debated, but I'm like, if I put in Felipe Franks, who only had one start, I have to put this guy in.
No, this is good. And man, I'm honestly kind of blanking on the name. What are you saying? Is it Brock? Hmm. Bro, what's the name? What's his last name?
Brock Berlin.
Oh, it is Brock Berlin. Okay. I did I knew that name and actually I was just thinking it wasn't him because I actually think of him more as a Miami quarterback.
Yeah,
Now you mention it. But yeah, Brock Berlin over there. Okay, that was good. Yeah, some of those I knew most all the names. It was just coming up with them starting a game. I had kind of looked
yeah,
over
that's the rough
guys
part.
like Felipe. blanking on Anthony Richardson. But that was a good question. I like that a lot.
You're
Um,
yeah, that Will Greer pull. I thought that one would have taken a little more time, but because I remember him that one year on Florida, and like
yeah.
there's such a bright future, but then all the everything that came out, then he had to be forced to transfer, and then he just had an amazing career at West Virginia.
Yeah, that was another. I was at the game against Tennessee with a friend of mine named Chris, and at the end of the game, we're down. He threw a little comeback route to Antonio Callaway, turned down the sideline, ran it into the end zone. We're going crazy. I think it was back-to-back years we had that, and then Felipe had the Hail Mary
Yeah.
for the touchdown to win against Tennessee again. So, oh no, it must have been uh, every other year because it was at home both games.
Yeah.
But man, some wild games there against Tennessee that were really fun to watch. But very good, man. I like that. I like that question. Thanks for bringing it up. Hope you guys enjoyed some old Florida Gator talk right there, which is really fun. But let's go on to some risers and fallers. We'll look back to our AP top 25 at this point, and man, looking at the results from this past week and the new poll that's out there, who would you say is your biggest riser, Nathaniel?
Yeah, this one, I mean, kind of have to, I'm debating between two. Obviously, I think I'm going to go with Notre Dame. I mean, this was a big test. You're going up against a team that is known for their physicality. You think service academies, you're like, oh, those are some tough teams. It's a team that's going to put pressure on you. And Notre Dame, pretty much the only thing that's been working for them all year is the power run, is strength, physicality. And it's like, all right, let's see head to head. You're going up against a really physical team. This is easily a game that, you blow some fundamentals and you kind of go behind Navy, which is going to run their offense all game long. Like you're saying, they're not going to throw it. They're not going to give you like those easy, defensive possessions. And I mean, Notre Dame showed up. There were a lot of mistakes, but I mean, I think they ended up, Navy had 6 turnovers at the end of the game. Notre
Hmm.
Dame just did what they did. They went up against physicality. They took advantage of every opportunity they were given. And they didn't, they just put separation between them, and they looked impressive. I mean, we'll really see against Army. I think before this game, I was pretty confident Army was going to beat Notre Dame just because of those same questions. But after just seeing this, I think Notre Dame has a really good shot at winning out. Hopefully they don't because they have USC on the schedule, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely huge win for them in that one. And my biggest riser's got to be a team that they beat earlier in the season. We've already talked about, but it's Texas A&M. We said last week that this was going to be a deciding game between A&M and LSU. Like one of them is going to continue on with one loss. They're leading the SEC, undefeated in conference, and are setting themselves up to potentially make it into the college football playoff, and they needed that. So huge win for them, jumping up to the top 10 of the rankings. And if they stick with Marcel Reed, this could be a huge changing pivotal point in their season. So I like that decision on their part. I'm moving them up as my biggest riser. My biggest faller is sadly going to be a team that dropped just out of the top 25. A team we've also talked about, it's Navy. Navy has been undefeated. They're just like Army, have been putting up these huge numbers on offense, and they fell on their face against Notre Dame, losing 51-14. Like we mentioned before, they were just making mistakes on their own. It was sad to watch, really. And for the rest of the season, they have Rice, USF, Tulane, East Carolina. So should be able to make it undefeated until that matchup in the conference championship game, and then their subsequent matchup against Army again. But man, the thing is that they're in a fight with Army, with who can stay undefeated, who can win that conference championship game. So that's what it's going to come down to, it seems like, at the end of the year, who can win that matchup in the conference championship. And it's just tough for them because Navy and Army were both just going up like this in the
Yeah.
rankings, uh, check by check, but then dropping their way out was certainly frustrating for them. So, yeah, Navy's my biggest faller. They have a chance to bring themselves back up, but we'll see about the rest of the season. What about you? Your biggest faller?
Yeah. I I was like this close, not really, to mentioning Missouri yet again, just because Vanderbilt,
Sure.
how are they how is Missouri in the top 25 and Vanderbilt isn't? Missouri
Yeah.
just gets shellacked by 34, and then Vanderbilt barely loses to a top 10 team in the country, and Missouri's ahead. I don't know. I digress, but I'm going to have to go with LSU. I mean, I mentioned earlier, I had high hopes for this team, seeing how they played against USC early in the year and how they've kind of, started to make a little bit of a comeback and really start pushing up and up. But man, this was disappointing. I mean, I think this is kind of a weird mirror to USC to where they've kind of struggled putting teams away at the end. I mean, we're looking at this game against South Carolina. That was a rough end to that game, but they pulled it out. I mean, they had so many opportunities to win in that one and in this one too. And it's just the amount of talent, and there's just so many miscues, whether it was that missed snap on the kick, all the interceptions and turnovers, and you had Texas A&M at Kyle Field
Right.
exactly where you wanted them, and you just folded at the end. It was they just disappeared. I mean, looking at the final score, 38-23, you couldn't really tell that it started like at halftime. LSU was dominating, like defensively, not letting Texas A&M breathe, which again, Marcel Reese coming in just changed the entire dynamic. And then LSU couldn't really respond, and they scored 6 points after halftime when they needed to score the most. So, biggest faller is going to have to be LSU. A lot of high hopes for this team. They have an outside chance. I think they play Alabama. They just have to win out and see kind of where college football playoff committee puts them.
Yeah, absolutely. Tough results for LSU and for Navy after last week, but we're going to preview some more that are coming up. We have our top five picks coming up right now. We're neck and neck, me and you, Nathaniel. I mean, I'm 27 and 19 after last week. You are 26 and 20. I had a 3-2 week. You went 4-1. That Navy pick really did me in. But we're both doing well. Again, you're making great money if you're betting with us. So follow us along. We're going to have five more picks for you right now with some good matchups. We're starting it off in the ACC. We've got Louisville traveling to Clemson. Clemson, number 11 in the country, a 10-point favorite in this game, but a good team under Jeff Brom. Who you got in this first one?
I mean, Louisville, they're a good team. I think they have a really strong offense. They have a lot of playmakers on offense. I think last year they looked and they're like, man, our defense is amazing. But that Florida State game last year, where their defense did their job and their offense scored what, like 6 points or something, it was
Right.
embarrassing. They're like, all right, we're gonna go get an offense. We can't pull quarterbacks from Cal anymore. And I mean, Tyler Shuck, he's been playing great, but then it just flip flopped. Their defense has been struggling all year. And I think this Clemson team, which started off not great. I mean, a bad first game. They just got blown out, but we talked about it after that game. Can they go on an Oregon run like Oregon did when they lost to Georgia and just started decimating teams after? And that's exactly what they've done. Their offense has been in sync ever since. Cade Klubnik, I mean, he's been rising up the Heisman voting odds more and more recently. I don't think he'll be kind of in that, New York finalist, but I think Clemson's going to win this game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think Louisville's going to go punch for punch with them, but I think Clemson's going to pull it out late.
Yeah, I just saw a thumbnail for a Heisman video, and Cade Klubnik was on it. I was like, what? I had not tuned into that to this point in the season. But I would agree with you. I think Clemson's going to be able to win this game. We've already hyped up Louisville in some games in the past, and like their game against Miami recently. They weren't able to win that one. Now they're playing at Clemson at night, and I think the Tigers are going to be able to win this one against Louisville. Now, I think we've already talked about a lot today, but we have number 10 Texas A&M traveling to a scary place, Williams-Brice Stadium against South Carolina. Texas A&M a 2.5 point favorite here, but on upset alert question mark, I think they might have to be. This is a team that's now going to potentially be led by Marcel Reed, freshman quarterback who's got a little experience, but he's going against this defensive line at South Carolina that can just manhandle you. So if they're not able to handle the line of scrimmage, he could get flustered back there and not be able to be in control. It'll come down to the health of South Carolina. If Lenora Sellers is continue to be healthy and can play, I'm going to take South Carolina to mess things up again. I'm taking South Carolina to win at home at Williams-Brice and to beat this Texas A&M team that we're throwing up here that we're excited about. No, South Carolina is going to take them down.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, just looking at, these matchups, South Carolina, you look at their losses. I mean, close game to LSU, arguably should have won that game. I mean, the refs had a little bit to, do in that situation. And then they had that close game against Alabama, which, I mean, they had a chance to win at the end. Um, and then they lost a tough one against Ole Miss. That one was definitely an upset alert, but Ole Miss got started too hot and just kind of kept rolling. Um, Man, I'm on the fence with this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, I was on the fence. Hearing you go South Carolina, I kind of really wanted to go South Carolina, but just to make things interesting, I'm going to go Texas A&M. I think we have Marcel Reed. You have to start him. You have to. I mean, he
Yeah.
changes that offense up, and you're going up against a tough defensive line. And I think this is going to be a defensive battle. I mean, South Carolina, they kind of do a very similar thing where they are very run heavy, and Texas A&M has very physical defensive line, physical defense all around. And I think Mike Elko, he's, you know, they're going away, but I think Mike Elko is going to have this team ready to go.
Yeah, it's going to be a toss-up. It'll be a fun game to watch on Saturday night for sure. Our next one, we have an interesting game here in the Big Ten with Minnesota traveling to play a ranked Illinois team, number 24 in the country. But Minnesota's favored by a few points in this game. So tough matchup. They've both had some interesting games as of late. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, this one's funny because like I've seen Minnesota. They're not like you don't think of them as a good team. Like they're just a very solid team, but they're kind of, making a run. They had a rough outing before that USC game, but they've rattled off 3 games in a row, beating USC, beating UCLA, then just demolishing another team that USC could not put away, Maryland. And it's, you know, PJ Fleck has that team going. They've kind of found an identity, and that's something that is you don't want to see as an opponent, a team that's finding an identity, they're getting going, and then on the other side, Illinois, yeah, they're still ranked, but they just had a brutal loss to Oregon. I mean, they lost by what, like 29 points or something like
Yeah,
that.
38
Luke
to 9.
Altmaier looked bad. He did not look great at all. I think he had under 50% completion percentage. And I agree with, I mean, it is in Illinois, but I think Minnesota, they're kind of picking up steam. I think they take another win.
Yeah, picking the Gophers to win this one. Okay, I'm gonna go the opposite direction. Here, even with that game last week, Illinois goes out to Oregon. They're at Autzen Stadium, the number one team in the country, and Oregon has showed themselves to be one of the premier programs right now. So that was sure to be a tough game. But in their previous games, they had a scare against Purdue, but were able to win it. And they showed some real strength against Michigan. But a big thing here, I think, is the comfort of being back at home after going to Oregon and coming back to play in Champaign. So I'm going to pick Illinois. I think Altmaier is going to be able to pick himself back up and they're going to get the victory. Okay, we've got a ranked ACC matchup, which is, doesn't look like an ACC game to me, but we have number 18 Pittsburgh traveling to number 20 SMU. And this game is definitely interesting because there are some playoff implications here that we're looking at. And we talked about how Clemson and Miami are the two who we see as the best chance to win the ACC and make it to the playoff, but Pitt's still undefeated. SMU has only one loss and they're undefeated in the conference. SMU is a 7.5 point favorite in this game. They're playing at home. But I would just watch out for the Pitt offense. They've been playing well this season. In their They just beat Syracuse 41-13. Meanwhile, SMU survived a scare against Duke. But they've been playing well also. This is a scary game on both sides, but I'm going there with again, I like home favorites. And so I'm going SMU to be able to still win in this game. The dual threat ability that they have, I think, is going to be able to give them success and be able to beat Pitt.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you there. I think Kevin Jennings, ever since they kind of put him in there, he has changed the entire offense. I mean, they they were kind of the one that broke Florida State. I mean, okay, Florida State, they were done, but that was that
Sure.
first game of wow, like SMU just ran over them. And I mean, Kevin Jennings is a great quarterback in my opinion, and I think he's gonna make the difference in this game. I think Pittsburgh we were talking about it earlier when they beat Syracuse. They had more points than they had, offensive yards, and I don't think it was 17 and 14 or something like that. I don't think Kevin Jennings and that SMU offense, which is rolling right now, is going to give you all those free plays like Cal McCord did last week. So I think SMU takes this one.
Yeah. Good call now. Biggest game of the week. We have number 4 Ohio State traveling to play number 3 Penn State. What a ginormous matchup in the Big Ten. We've already seen Ohio State play Oregon, which was amazing. Now they're playing against the Nittany Lions. You've got the first pick here, man. What are your thoughts?
This one's a tough one. Like you want to look at the last couple games. Penn State, they're always, that doubted team. They don't have, they don't put teams away, but they beat everyone until, they face Ohio State or Michigan. That's literally been James Franklin ever since. I think the last time they beat one of those teams was in like 2016 or something like that. So you have that thing going for Penn State, and then you look at the other side at Ohio State. Ryan Day hasn't beaten a top five team in a minute. So it's a battle between who can kind of break through. It's at Penn State, which, man, is that a tough place to play? And going against Nebraska last week, Ohio State, this should have been a get back game. You just saw Nebraska get destroyed. Indiana beat them by like 49 points. And Ohio State comes into it trying to run the ball. And their two great running backs, Judkins and Henderson, does nothing. 64 yards total or something like that. Will Howard looked all right. He couldn't really run the ball at all. And you kind of see if they can't run the ball, they're in trouble. They have great receivers, but Will Howard isn't the guy to put everything on his back and say, go win us the game. I mean, he had great numbers, but it's hard. I think that's with Drew Aller maybe being hurt, that kind of throws a wrench in it. And I mean, his backup, Bo something looked
Hmm.
good. This is tough. I'm like going back and forth in my head. I think I'm gonna go Penn State here. I
Mm.
think they've just been a lot more consistent, and they've shown they can kind of win without a lot of quarterback help. And if they stop that Ohio State running game, I think Ohio State's in a lot of trouble.
Okay, going with Penn State in this one. I I've been down on Drew Aller for a long time. I've doubted him plenty. So the question is, will I finally go on his side and pick him to have the victory, Penn State to have the victory here? A big thing to me in this matchup, because we're looking at it, it's pretty even on both sides. It's hard to tell who exactly will have the upper hand. A big thing for me is that it's at noon. This is a
Yeah,
noon game. Even though it's at Beaver Stadium, it's a different place at night. I think
yeah,
at noon, Ohio State being able to come in there off of a scare that they just had last week will have their minds sharp and ready to go. Ryan Day to take his team to have a victory here against Penn State and bringing both of them to 7-1 on the year behind Indiana and Oregon in the Big Ten picture. So I'm taking Ohio State, and just to jumble up the Big Ten even more to make it even more fun to watch. So with that, if I'm not mistaken, we've got three games different on our picks,
yep.
which is a lot of
Had to
fun.
switch it up from last week.
Yeah, I know, seriously. So we have games to watch. We're recording this on Thursday, so we're just a couple days away from watching these wonderful games. Looking forward to it. Thanks for listening in. We hope you are infotained on everything that we talked about. And join us again next week. We'll have another trivia question. We'll talk more about the new college football playoff rankings that will be released. It'll be a lot of fun. So follow us on Instagram, listen to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, all those things. We'll be back with you next week. Have a great week, everyone.
Yep.